She hid the twins from him for 6 years. He was a billionaire everyone feared. But one day, a little girl walked into his office and said the words that shattered his empire more than any financial crisis ever could: "You're our dad." The lobby of Harrington Group was a cathedral of glass and silence. Marble floors reflected the ceiling lights with clinical precision, and every step echoed as if the building itself demanded restraint. Employees moved quickly, voices lowered, eyes fixed forward. Everyone knew the rule: never create unnecessary noise, never draw attention, never interrupt Leonard Harrington unless invited. Leonard stood in his office above it all, looking down through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 7 years ago, this height had felt like victory. Power. Control. A place where nothing could touch him. Now it felt more like distance, from people, from warmth, from anything that resembled a real life. His dark hair was threaded faintly with gray at the temples, his green eyes sharp but tired. The explosive temper that once defined him had burned itself out, leaving behind a quieter, more dangerous emptiness. He was signing documents when the intercom buzzed. Once. Hesitant. "Mr. Harrington," the secretary said carefully, "there's a situation in the lobby." Leonard exhaled, irritation flickering automatically. "Handle it." "She's asking for you." He paused. "Who is she?" Another hesitation. "A child." That got his attention, if only because children did not appear in his world. He rose, straightened his jacket, and stepped out, already preparing to dismiss whatever foolishness this was. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. In the lobby, everything had frozen. At the center of the polished floor stood a little girl, no older than 6. She had brown hair falling loosely to her shoulders and striking green eyes that scanned the room with unsettling calm. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She looked like she belonged exactly where she was. Leonard stopped a few feet away from her. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low, controlled. The girl turned to face him fully. For a split second, something strange tugged at his chest, an instinctive, irrational recognition he dismissed immediately. "My name is Emma," she said clearly. "I'm looking for my dad." A few employees exchanged nervous glances. Leonard frowned. "And who told you I'm your father?" Emma tilted her head, studying him the way adults studied contracts. "My mom didn't. I just know." "That's not how things work," Leonard said, though his voice had lost some of its edge. She took a small step closer. "You're Leonard Harrington. You have green eyes. So do I. And my sister." The word sister landed harder than it should have. Leonard felt something crack, not loudly, not all at once, but enough to unsettle the careful structure of his composure. "Where is your mother?" he asked. Emma hesitated for the first time. "She doesn't know I came." The lobby felt suddenly too small, the air too thin. 7 years of solitude pressed in around him, colliding violently with the impossible reality standing in front of him. Emma looked up at him again, her voice quiet but unwavering. "You're our dad." And in that moment, Leonard Harrington, billionaire, ruler of boardrooms, master of control, realized that whatever he thought he had lost years ago had just found him. Evelyn Moore had learned to live with constant vigilance. It shaped her mornings, sharpened her instincts, and followed her even into sleep. She woke before the alarm, as she always did, lying still for a few seconds to listen, to the soft hum of the refrigerator, to the distant traffic outside, to the quiet breathing of her daughters in the next room. Silence, she had learned, could be both a warning and a gift. The apartment was small but carefully kept. Toys were organized into bins, shoes lined neatly by the door, school bags hanging from hooks. Evelyn had installed herself. Order was not a preference, it was armor. With 2 6-year-old girls to protect, she couldn't afford chaos. She stood in the kitchen, stirring coffee she barely tasted, her brown eyes fixed on nothing in particular. Her reflection in the darkened window looked older than she felt, brown hair pulled back in a loose knot, faint shadows beneath her eyes. 7 years had passed since she had walked away from Leonard Harrington, yet the memory of him remained uncomfortably vivid. Not the billionaire the world feared, but the man she had loved before anger and power hardened him into someone unpredictable. Lily and Emma were identical in ways that still startled strangers. Same height. Same dark lashes. Same green eyes that had never belonged to Evelyn. She had known from the moment she saw them that there would be no hiding the truth forever. She had only hoped to delay it until they were strong enough to understand why she had made the choices she did. "Mom," Lily said quietly from the doorway. She had always been the observant one, the child who noticed what went unsaid. "Emma's not here." The coffee cup slipped slightly in Evelyn's hand. "What do you mean?" she asked, already moving. Emma's bed was empty. Her jacket was gone. So were her shoes. The room tilted. Evelyn's heartbeat roared in her ears as understanding crashed into her with brutal clarity. She didn't need to ask where Emma had gone. She knew. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She grabbed her phone, hands shaking as she dialed Emma's number, an emergency phone Evelyn had given her with strict instructions never to leave the building alone. The call went straight to voicemail. Panic surged, sharp and unforgiving. 7 years of careful distance unraveled in seconds. She had hidden the girls from Leonard not out of cruelty, but out of fear of his temper, of his control, of a world where money could overpower safety. She had promised herself she would never let them stand in his shadow. And now one of them was walking straight into it. Evelyn pulled on her coat and rushed out, her thoughts racing faster than her steps. She didn't know what Emma would say. She didn't know what Leonard would do. All she knew was that the life she had built on silence had finally reached its breaking point. As she drove toward the city, her grip on the steering wheel tightened. The past was no longer something she could outrun. It was waiting. Leonard sat across from Emma in a quiet conference room overlooking the city, the glass walls muted just enough to grant them privacy without fully separating them from the world he ruled. The room had hosted billion-dollar negotiations, hostile takeovers, and carefully choreographed power plays. Now it held a small girl with dangling feet and unblinking green eyes, and Leonard Harrington had never felt less prepared. "Do you want some water?" he asked, softer than anyone in the building had ever heard him speak. Emma nodded. "Please." He poured it himself, noticing how his hands were unsteady. The realization irritated him, but he didn't try to correct it. When he handed her the glass, their fingers brushed briefly. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through him, something primal and disorienting. "You said you have a sister," Leonard began, choosing each word carefully. "What's her name?" "Lily," Emma replied. "She's quieter than me. She thinks before she talks." He almost smiled. "Almost." "And your mom," he said. "Evelyn." Emma's posture shifted subtly. "She didn't want me to come. But she's always sad when she talks about you. I don't think you're a bad person." Leonard leaned back, absorbing that. 7 years ago, he would have snapped at such boldness. 7 years ago, he would have dismissed this entire situation as manipulation or coincidence. But the man he had been then felt distant now, like someone else's memory. "Why did you think I was your father?" he asked. Emma shrugged. "Mom doesn't lie. She just doesn't say everything. And when people don't say everything, it's usually because they're scared. I wanted to see if you were scary." "And am I?" Leonard asked quietly. She studied him for a long moment, then shook her head. "You look lonely." The word struck deeper than any accusation ever had. Lonely. After Evelyn left, Leonard's temper hadn't vanished overnight. It had burned for months, scorching everything in its path. Employees resigned. Friends disappeared. The press sharpened their knives. And then, gradually, the anger had collapsed inward, leaving behind a hollow calm. He built walls higher than his towers, convincing himself that isolation was strength. But sitting there, faced with a child who looked at him without fear or expectation, he saw the truth with startling clarity. The loneliness hadn't come after Evelyn left. It had started when he let her go. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said finally, the edge of command slipping back into his voice, not as control, but as concern. "I know," Emma said. "But if I didn't, you'd never come to us." Leonard closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had shifted. He stood and pressed a button on the table. "Get me a car," he said to the assistant on the line. "And tell security no one leaves this building without my say." He turned back to Emma, kneeling so they were eye level. "I don't know yet what I am to you," he said carefully. "But I'm not sending you away. Not today." Emma smiled, not triumphantly, but with quiet relief. "Okay," she said. "Mom's on her way." For the first time in 7 years, Leonard Harrington felt fear and hope coexist in the same breath. And he understood that whatever was coming next would dismantle the last illusion of control he still had. He didn't stop it. He waited. Evelyn arrived at the Harrington Group building breathless, her heart pounding so violently she felt it in her throat. The towering glass facade reflected her back at herself, small, tense, out of place. For a moment, she stood frozen on the sidewalk, overwhelmed by the weight of memory. 7 years ago, she had walked away from this world believing she would never return. Now she was back, not as a lover, not as an equal, but as a mother afraid of what she might lose. Security recognized her name almost immediately. That alone unsettled her. She had worked hard to disappear, yet Leonard's world had a way of remembering. She was escorted upstairs in silence. The elevator climbed steadily, each floor tightening the knot in her chest. By the time the doors opened, her hands were trembling. Leonard was already standing when she entered the conference room. Their eyes met, and the past surged between them, unresolved, unsoftened. He looked different. Still powerful, still unmistakably Leonard Harrington, but the sharp volatility she remembered was gone. In its place was something rawer. Something exposed. Emma sat at the table, swinging her legs, perfectly calm. "Mom," she said brightly. "I told him." Evelyn's breath caught. "Emma," she whispered, rushing forward and pulling her into her arms, checking her instinctively as if harm could be invisible. "I told you not to." "I know," Emma said quietly. "But I had to." Evelyn straightened slowly and turned to Leonard. Her brown eyes were steady now, hardened by years of necessity. "You had no right to keep her here," she said. "She's a child." Leonard didn't raise his voice. He didn't move closer. "She came on her own. And I wasn't about to send her away without answers." "You don't get answers," Evelyn shot back. "Not after all this time." The silence that followed was thick, charged with everything they had never said. Leonard broke it first. "She's 6, he said hoarsely. "And she has a sister." Evelyn closed her eyes. There it was. The moment she had been postponing for 7 years. "Yes," she said. "Twins." He let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You hid them from me." "I protected them," she corrected. "From the man you were." His jaw tightened. "You decided that alone." "I had to," she said, her voice breaking despite herself. "You were angry all the time. Unpredictable. You thought control was love. I was scared of what that world would do to them." Leonard looked at Emma, then back at Evelyn. "And did you ever think about what it did to me? To lose you without knowing why?" "Yes," Evelyn said immediately. "Every day." The honesty in her answer disarmed him more than any accusation could have. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," she continued. "I left because loving you wasn't enough to keep us safe." For the first time since she entered the room, Leonard looked away. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "I was a terrible man back then," he admitted. "I won't deny it. But I changed. Not because I wanted redemption, but because I was alone." Evelyn studied his face, searching for traces of manipulation, of the dominance she once knew so well. She found none. Only regret. And something dangerously close to grief. You don't get to step into their lives just because you're ready now, she said quietly. I know, Leonard replied. But I'm not stepping out of it either. Emma slipped her small hand into Evelyn's. I want him to know Lily, she said softly. She's scared. But I think he won't shout anymore. The words landed with devastating precision. Leonard knelt in front of Emma, his voice steady but thick. I won't, he said. Not ever. Evelyn watched them, the carefully built wall around her heart cracking just enough to let doubt and possibility through. She had spent years believing she was protecting her daughters from danger. Now she wasn't sure who needed protection more. The first call came before nightfall. Evelyn was packing their things in silence, her movements sharp and automatic, when her phone vibrated against the kitchen counter. She almost ignored it. Instinct told her that whatever waited on the other end would not bring relief. When she finally answered, the voice was calm, professional, and devastatingly impersonal. MS. Moore, this is Child Protective Services. We need to speak with you regarding a report filed this afternoon. The room seemed to lose its shape. Evelyn lowered herself into a chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. What kind of report? She asked, though some part of her already knew. There are concerns about concealment of paternity, relocation without disclosure, and potential emotional risk to the children. She closed her eyes. Someone had acted quickly. Too quickly. Across the city, Leonard received the same call in his office, moments after ending a tense conversation with his legal team. The name of the department alone made his stomach tighten in a way no hostile acquisition ever had. This was not a problem he could solve with influence or money. This was about his daughters. About Evelyn. About 7 years of silence catching up all at once. By the time Evelyn arrived at the scheduled meeting the next morning, she felt stripped bare. Lily clung to her side, quiet and pale, her green eyes darting nervously around the unfamiliar building. Emma stood a little straighter, trying to be brave for both of them. Leonard was already there. The sight of him waiting, not behind a desk, not surrounded by lawyers, but standing alone, stopped Evelyn short. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she understood something that sent a chill through her. This was bigger than both of them now. The social worker spoke gently, but the words were sharp. Questions about why Leonard had not been informed. Why the children had been moved repeatedly. Why there was no formal record of a father. Evelyn answered each one honestly, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. I left because I was afraid, she said. Not for myself. For them. And now? The woman asked. Evelyn hesitated. Leonard spoke before she could. Now I'm here, he said. And I take full responsibility for what I didn't know. For what I didn't see. For what I should have been. Evelyn turned to him sharply. Leonard, I won't let them take this out on you, he continued, his voice calm but unyielding. If anyone failed here, it was me. I had the power to protect my family, and I didn't even know they existed. The room went quiet. The social worker studied him carefully. Mr. Harrington, your past behavior has been documented. Your temper. Your public incidents. I know, Leonard said. And I won't defend them. But they are not my present. I will submit to any evaluation you require. Therapy. Monitoring. Supervision. Whatever it takes. Evelyn stared at him, stunned. This was not the man she had left. This man was choosing exposure over control. Vulnerability over dominance. The most shocking moment came when Leonard stood up and addressed the room directly. If you believe these children are at risk, he said, then place the conditions on me. Not their mother. She has spent 6 years protecting them alone. I will not allow her to be punished for that. Lily tugged gently on Evelyn's sleeve. Mom, she whispered, is he going to be mad? Evelyn swallowed hard. No, sweetheart. Leonard knelt in front of Lily, meeting her gaze with deliberate care. I was angry once, he said softly. But I'm not anymore. And I'm sorry you had to be scared of me without even knowing me. Lily studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Okay. That single word shifted everything. The meeting ended without a decision, only conditions and time. But as they stepped outside together, the weight felt different. Heavier, but shared. Evelyn finally turned to Leonard, her voice breaking despite her effort. They could take them. I won't let that happen, he said simply. Not to you. Not to them. Even if it costs me everything. For the first time since this nightmare began, Evelyn realized the most shocking truth of all. She was no longer fighting alone. The waiting was worse than the fear. Days stretched into a tense, fragile routine where every phone vibration made Evelyn's heart race and every knock at the door felt like a threat. The conditions imposed by social services were strict: supervised visits, regular evaluations, detailed reports. Life slowed to a crawl, reduced to schedules and checklists, as if love itself had to be measured and approved. Leonard complied without hesitation. He submitted to psychological assessments, parenting courses, and interviews that dissected his past with merciless precision. He answered questions about his temper, his control, his failures. Not once did he deflect. Not once did he attempt to leverage his wealth. For a man who had once ruled through authority, the surrender was deliberate and transformative. Evelyn watched him closely. She expected resentment to surface eventually, the old impatience, the frustration of being questioned and restrained. Instead, she saw consistency. He arrived early for every supervised visit. He listened more than he spoke. When Lily retreated into silence, he didn't push. When Emma challenged him with blunt questions, he answered honestly, even when the truth was uncomfortable. One afternoon, during a supervised visit at a community center, Lily finally spoke to him without prompting. "Why did Mom cry at night?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Leonard froze, the question striking deeper than any accusation. He glanced at Evelyn, who looked away, unprepared. "Because she was carrying something alone," he said carefully. "And she was very brave." Lily considered this, then nodded. She took a marker from the table and slid it toward him. It wasn't an embrace. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was an opening. Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest. At night, after the girls were asleep, she and Leonard talked quietly in the kitchen, the space between them filled with unfinished history. These conversations were harder than the confrontations. There was no mediator, no structure, just honesty. "I thought leaving was the only way to keep them safe," Evelyn said one night, her voice raw. "But watching you with them now, I don't know where fear ends and habit begins anymore." Leonard leaned against the counter, his posture unguarded. "I don't want you to forget who I was," he said. "I need you to remember. Just don't let that be the only version of me." She met his gaze. "That's what scares me. And that's what keeps me accountable," he replied. The most difficult moment came when Lily fell ill. A fever spiked suddenly, sending Evelyn into panic. Without thinking, she called Leonard. He arrived within minutes, calm and focused, helping manage the crisis with steady presence rather than command. He stayed up through the night, sitting on the floor beside Lily's bed, murmuring reassurance until her breathing evened out. Watching him, Evelyn felt the last of her certainty fracture. Weeks passed. Reports were filed. Observations were noted. Slowly, imperceptibly, the language from social services shifted, from concern to cautious optimism. Supervision eased. Boundaries relaxed. Trust, once withheld, began to take form. Then came the meeting that would decide everything. Evelyn sat between her daughters, Leonard beside them, as the lead caseworker spoke. "We've reviewed all evaluations," the woman said. "There is no evidence of ongoing risk. What we do see is accountability, stability, and genuine effort from both parents." Evelyn's breath caught. "The case will be closed," the woman continued, with recommendations for continued therapy, not as a requirement, but as support. The words landed softly, almost unreal. Outside the building, the girls ran ahead, laughing for the first time in weeks. Evelyn stood frozen, the tension draining from her body in a wave that left her dizzy. Leonard turned to her. "It's over." She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "No," she said. "It's beginning." He reached for her hand, stopping just short, giving her the choice. After a moment, she took it. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't forgiveness in full. But it was trust, slowly reclaimed. Time did what neither apologies nor promises ever could. It softened the sharpest edges without erasing the scars, allowing space for something new to grow where fear had once lived. Life settled into a rhythm that felt almost unreal in its simplicity. School mornings filled with hurried breakfasts, evenings spent helping with homework, weekends shaped by small traditions that slowly became sacred. The house Leonard bought was not a mansion. It surprised everyone, including Evelyn. He chose a place with a garden instead of gates, with laughter echoing through hallways instead of silence reinforced by wealth. It was there that the twins began to feel rooted. Emma filled the rooms with questions and energy, while Lily claimed quiet corners where she read or drew, always close enough to feel safe. Leonard changed in ways no press release could capture. He learned how to wait, how to ask instead of demand, how to kneel to a child's level and listen without interruption. There were moments when the old instinct for control stirred, but he recognized it now, named it, and let it pass. Power no longer defined him. Presence did. Evelyn watched all of this with cautious awe. She had spent years believing that love meant endurance, that protection required isolation. Slowly, she began to understand that strength could also look like sharing the weight. She allowed herself to rest in small moments, leaning against the kitchen counter while Leonard cooked, laughing when Emma teased him for burning pancakes, trusting Lily's quiet smile when she slipped her hand into his without thinking. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold, the four of them sat in the garden. The twins were busy tying ribbons to the fence, declaring it their secret place. "This is our family spot," Emma announced proudly. Leonard smiled. "Does it come with rules?" Lily considered this carefully. "No shouting," she said. "And no leaving." The words hung in the air, gentle but firm. Leonard met Evelyn's eyes. There was no defensiveness in his gaze. Only understanding. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "Not from them. Not from you." Evelyn felt the truth of it settle deep in her chest. She thought of the girl she had been 7 years ago, afraid, exhausted, desperate to protect what she loved even if it meant disappearing. She had been brave then. But this, staying, trusting, choosing partnership, required a different kind of courage. That night, after the girls were asleep, Evelyn joined Leonard on the porch. The world was quiet, the future finally free of immediate fear. "I don't regret leaving," she said softly. "But I don't regret coming back either." Leonard nodded. "Neither do I. Losing you taught me what power could never give." He didn't reach for her. He didn't ask for more. And somehow, that restraint mattered more than any declaration. Evelyn moved closer on her own, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. It wasn't a promise of forever. It was something better. It was choice. Inside the house, the twins slept peacefully, unaware of how fiercely they had been loved, how close everything had come to breaking. Outside, under a quiet sky, a family stood not because it was perfect, but because it had been rebuilt, slowly, honestly, and without fear. And this time, no one was hiding. This story is not just about secrets and unexpected children. It is about transformation. About how power without love empties a person, and love without boundaries makes one vulnerable. Evelyn hid the twins not out of selfishness, but out of fear and maternal instinct. Leonard lost years not because he was a bad father, but because he wasn't ready to become one. The moral of the story is that the past cannot be erased, but it can be redefined. People do not change when they lose everything, they change when they realize that loneliness is the most devastating form of power. True strength lies in taking responsibility for mistakes, listening, and staying present, even when it is difficult. Do you believe a person can truly change for the people they once lost? This story is entirely fictional and created by the author of the channel. Any resemblance to real people is purely coincidental.